Now, welcome to OState Daily. Casey Porter here, joined by Scott McKinley on a Sunday after an off week. There was some good action in the Big 12 last night, but Oklahoma State was not in action, Scott. So what are your thoughts on how the weekend has gone so far?
Well, it was actually kind of a relaxing one. I was able to get some stuff done around the house. I kind of needed to get done. So at least there's that. I mean, I still, I have no off days when it comes to football. I still watch some football, maybe not as intently as I do on days that OSU's playing, but still was able to watch some football, relax a little bit. Kind of got to take a breather a little bit, and I'm kind of hoping, I'm sure our players appreciated that a little bit too. We talk, we're going to get into, talk about the season and everything, but, even as bad of a season as we're having and everything, sometimes kids and coaches, everybody just needs to get away from the facility for just a few days. I mean, that's just, that's good even in a great year. So hopefully the bye week's been good for everybody.
Hey, and one thing about the maturity as far as the length in years and the tenure that Coach Gundy has created here at Oklahoma State, I do think, and I know there's a lot of improvements to make, probably not going to happen in the last 2 weeks. I think a younger coach would be a little bit more in panic mode and would try to add more during an off week. Coach Gundy decided to add less. I mean, hey, just exactly what you just said. Let's get the hell away from here. This is a negative cesspool right now. Nothing's working out. Go fishing. Go to the movies with your girlfriend. It's like you lock the gate and say, hey, nobody's going to be here. I'm not hitting you ground balls. I'm not throwing you BP. I don't even want you to think about baseball until Wednesday, right? And so he took that approach. At least that's what he said he was going to do Monday. And I can't tell you how much I agree with that approach.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's just, it's one of those things, and I think people don't realize is that these players, these coaches, it is literally 365 days a year. They're thinking about football in one way or another. So I think sometimes you just need to get, relax, get your mind reset, and hopefully that'll pay some dividends here moving forward. Like I said, I don't know what, at this point, I don't know what changes are, frankly, that could be made that are going to result in a W on the. But like we said before, so now we're actually in a mode where now we're trying to build for next year. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? If there is a silver lining on all of this, is I would like to think that our coaching staff has gotten an early jump on evaluating film on guys possibly bringing in the transfer portal. They're probably having conversations with guys about that. That's something that I do think that the transfer portal this year is going to be incredibly active, not just for Oklahoma State, but for all of college football. That's becoming more. I think we're going to see more transfer portal activity, not less, throughout the entire country when it comes to the portal.
So kind of to hammer home on a point you made right there, one of the big things that I hear about the advantages of going to a bowl game, even in today's day and age where players are opting not to play in them, that started several years ago, is that you get that extra however many practices there are for your younger players. So one of the advantages of Oklahoma, like if Oklahoma State would have went all the way like Nebraska's going to do, like OU's going to do, OU's probably going to get beat by Alabama this weekend, right? And then they're going to go to LSU, and if they win, they make a bowl. If they lose, they don't. So if they lose these next two games, that is doomsday scenario for a team. And follow me here. Oklahoma State got disqualified from a bowl 2 weeks ago, right? And so they got disqualified early enough to where, as you were saying, they can use this time the same way they would have bowl practice weeks. And instead, there's no reason for Jake Springfield and Joe Mahalski and even an Ollie Gordon or even an Alan Bowman to take a whole lot of reps at practice. The Oklahoma State coaching staff has the opportunity, because we were disqualified from bowl season so early, to basically use the last entire month of this season as practice for the young kids, which replaces that time you would have spent in a bowl between your last game and the bowl game.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. The other thing I think that also may also work in our favor on that is I think we all suspect that there are coaching changes that are coming. Yeah. Don't know what they are, but I'll be shocked if there's not a single one made. I'll put it that way. That kind of allows you to, you probably already had conversations with coaches least I would think you probably have. And it allows you for those changes to occur probably earlier in the process than what they would in a typical bowl game. Because you think about it, if you were
good point.
If you're going to a good bowl, the whole coaching staff is intact. Yeah, I mean, there's again, this is not the season we want. This is not the season anybody wanted. But at the same time, we're now in rebuilding mode, and those are the things that I think that at least may be starting to swing in our favor a little bit, hopefully.
So the silver linings here, and we're reaching, trust me, because I said it on the last podcast with Chase, I'm just tired of wallowing around in the negativity, right? I got to find something that's fun to talk about, something that's a little bit more enlightening, something that's not quite as dark. So I think really the biggest silver lining of this whole thing is that this season has gone so sideways and so south that it's going to force changes on Coach Gundy. We know Coach Gundy does not like to make changes, and rightfully so, man. I am totally in his corner on that deal. I'm telling you, if you've ever been a head coach, you love your assistants, you go to war with your assistants, and the worst conversation you can have is with a guy that you handpicked to walk in and go, man, you failed. You failed me so bad that I'm having to fire you. That is, I know we see that like the $1 million a year, so we have no sympathy for them. I get all that. I'm not saying that. But you've seen the personal side of it. I don't make $1 million a year. And we're in the same situations to where somebody's not doing your job, somebody else has to do it. So I'm saying all of that to say I totally understand Mike Gundy hating this situation. Not wanting to do it at all. Plus, as well as I do, Scott, that whenever you change something, it can actually get worse. It can always get worse. It doesn't have to always get better. And then I think one thing that Coach Gundy's always hung his hat on, you've said this many different times, is consistency in its program. And when you're changing coaches, especially coordinators, you are just putting a knife right in the middle of that consistency. So you're really just kind of slicing and dicing his entire formula that he's had since he's been at OSU. So I understand all that. Yeah.
No, those are never easy conversations to have. And the other thing I would say, and I don't want people to misconstrue this and say that I love everything that our coordinators have done, because we've discussed all of that in detail.
Yes,
but the other thing I think that also can be a difficult time for a coach is there are times when your coordinator worked his tail off, was doing a pretty darn good job. It just didn't come out on the results on the field. Correct. And okay, sorry, man, we have to go a different way just because that's the way this business works. So no, and again, I agree with Gundy as far as the strategy from an overall standpoint, but I also think, man, after we're about to go 3-9. There's changes coming. It's going to have to happen. So.
Okay, or 4-8, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. If we beat Texas Tech, whatever. And kind of what we're both saying, I think, here is that there can be two different things at once. There can be the fact that I still think Brian Nardo was pinned into a 40 front defense, that he wasn't brought here to coach, right? I think he was asked to coordinate a defense that's not his. I know he ran it, back in Emporia State, like in 2015 or whatever, but he is brought here to run the odd stack. It can be true that that's the fact. And then also to ask a young D2 guy to come in and try to be the boss of Joe Bob Clements or be the boss of Tim Duffy, who have had success in a 40 front defense. Hey, here's this whippersnapper D2 guy coming in, right? That's not very easy to do, especially when things go south. So I think that can be true, that really just kind of the situation that Nardo was put in was almost not attainable. It was a situation that just wasn't set up for him to have success, especially after the injuries. I think you can have that be true and then also say it doesn't matter because this defense is what it is, and you can't keep a coordinator that has coordinated this defense. So I feel like I can say I still think Brian Nardo is a really good young coach. I think he's going to have a really nice career, but it just didn't work in this scenario.
Yeah, I would echo that absolutely 100%. Because when you think about it, we're just a year away from that huge Bedlam win. When you think about it, Nardo's defense that day did a pretty nice job shutting down Dylan Gabriel, who is now the quarterback for the number one ranked team in the nation. So it's interesting how quickly things can change like that. But no, I've had the exact same thought that I think Nardo is a smart guy. He knows the game. It just, for whatever reason, it just didn't work here. That doesn't mean that, okay, here in 10 years, or we don't see him becoming, one of the great minds of football. But it's probably, in my opinion, it's probably not going to be here where that's at. But, but at the same time, Gundy, the other thing that I think that we should have some faith in Gundy in, he's done a pretty darn good job finding good coordinators. There's been a few misses here and there, but for the most part, Gundy does a pretty good job of evaluating coaches coming in here. So my hope is that he's already been doing his homework and he's got a good list of candidates for whoever, whoever is going to be coming out and whoever's going to be coming in. So my hope is that Gundy will find some other good hires if that's the case.
My pushback on, I know Tim Beckman went and became the head coach, I believe, at Toledo.
Yeah.
But still, his defenses weren't very good at Oklahoma State. I think Jim Knowles obviously was a really good hire. Bill Young was a really good hire. So he's had a couple of good hires on the defensive side. I would say that obviously Larry Fedora was a home run hire. Dana Holgerson was a home run hire. Todd Monken was a home run hire. And then I think from that point on, he's hired guys that will allow him to have a little bit more control and consistency. And he hasn't hired to find the best guy. He's hired to find the guy that will stay the longest. So the combination of the best job that I can get for the longest amount of time, that's been his consideration for hiring. Yeah.
And that's, and I'll go back to something Coach Rainwater said. I hate to give him credit on everything, but he's absolutely right about this. When at Oklahoma State in the past, we didn't need an absolute shutdown defense. We needed a defense that would create some turnovers, get us just a few stops, because our offense was so high flying and putting points on the board that we didn't have to have a shutdown defense. Well, okay, we kind of made a little bit of a shift where we tried to become more of a defensive-minded team, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I mean, I'm sure if Gundy, put some truth serum in him, he understands offense better than he does defense. He was an offensive guy. He was an offensive coordinator. He was a quarterback. Doesn't mean that he doesn't understand defense. I know he does, but that's not, at that level, that's not his forte, if you will. He's definitely an offensive guy. So my hope is, like I said, moving forward, we find a good one. And that's assuming that Nardo's not going to be here next year, which we don't know. Knowing Gundy, we talked about this. It wouldn't shock me if he said, you know what, we had a bad year this year, but Brian's still my guy, and we're going to ride with him. And I'm sure the administration would say, okay. I mean, that's they probably would. Gundy's over a 20-year period with his contract and everything and his track record. If he went and said, no, these are the guys I'm riding with, that's probably the way it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, nobody could do anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear all this. Oh, this guy can do that. I guess. I mean, I think that's a pipe dream. If Gundy came out and said, "I'm not making changes. I'm coming back next year. Deal with it. I know better than everybody else." What can anybody at Oklahoma State actually do about that? Are you really going to round up $30 million to remove the head coach at Oklahoma State? And because this was my conversation about Josh Holiday at the end of the baseball season. If you go round up $30 million to fire Mike Gundy after this year, okay, after he was the conference coach of the year last year, after he was in the Big 12 championship last year, after he's in the Big 12, he was a couple of inches away in 2021, after he's built this program over the last 20 years, after he's just made Oklahoma State relevant over the last 2 decades, which is a long time. If Oklahoma State fires that guy, we immediately become the laughing stock of everybody else in the United States of America. Instantly. So these people say, well, we've got this rounded up. We can do it. Nope. If Mike Gundy wants to be here next year and he doesn't want to make a damn change, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. Now, again, I'll reiterate, I do think changes are coming.
Yes, I agree. Because he loves OSU and he loves winning. But I don't think – I do think there's conversations being had. Hey, Mike, we need to change this. Hey, Mike, we need to make changes. We're not going to sell season tickets. We're not going to have – we've got to – I think that conversation's being had. But in the bottom end of it is, if he says no to it all, he says no to it all.
Yeah. The other thing I would also say is I do think Mike has a better relationship with our administration now than he did, 8, 9, 10 years ago. So my hope is that they've already had they're starting to have those conversations,
Right.
and that basically, okay, Mike, they're asking, okay, what do we need? Because at the end of the day, we can, as fans, we can lob tomatoes and vegetables at people, but at the end of the day, it's what solution, what changes do we need to make, what change in our process, mindset, how we target, what recruits we're targeting, how we use the portal. As I said, I'm expecting for Oklahoma State to have a really big portal year, both outgoing and incoming this next year, which, as we said before, here's another possible silver lining is you can get good real fast if you use the portal to your advantage.
Well, look at Oregon. Look at the quarterback.
It's not like the old days where if you were bad, if you were bad one year, well, you knew there wasn't going to be a whole lot of roster turnover the next year. You probably were down again next year. And in the transfer portal world, that's not necessarily the case. So that's what I'm hoping is going to happen for us.
So, we kind of say all this, and you said, hey, we think there's going to be changes here or there. We think there's going to be changes there. If he does not remove Brian Nardo, there's only one thing I think he could say that would not make OSU fans lose their mind at this point. I think if Mike Gundy came out and said, point blank, we have all these older coaches, experienced coaches, whatever you want to call them. I trumped the situation. I forced him to run a 4-2-5 instead of a 3-3-5. And to be honest with you, in my evaluation of things, that's actually what caused all the problems. This was on me and not him because of the schematical issue that I pinned him into. If he came out and said that, I think he could get away with maybe trying Brian Nardo again. If he then followed that up by saying, guys, we're going to the odd stack. We're going to run the 3-3-5. We're going to do it like Iowa State did. We're going to do it like Kansas State does, like all these teams that are having success, and we're going to actually run the defense that he is creative with. I think that's the only way that he could have a narrative that wouldn't make Oklahoma State fans lose their mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think they'd lose their mind, but maybe,
yes, right.
maybe less so. At least it wouldn't be directed at Nardo; it'd be directed towards Gundy.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, no, and that's and we've talked about that many times. That we're not running what Nardo's not been able to run the defense that he was brought in to run. But at the same time, I think the question when I look at it in my mind is, okay, is Nardo going to be able to sell a recruit coming into Oklahoma State for next year? Because that's really that's where we're at right now, is who are we bringing in either through high school or the portal or however. And I guess that's the question is because here's the deal. If you think Nardo's a great recruiter and he's going to be able to bring in new guys, okay, Mike might be willing to do what you just said. If the answer is no or even average at this point, I think the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what Gundy thinks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the Casey Dunn situation is very interesting because, man, this dude's a really good recruiter. He has meant a lot to Oklahoma State. No Oklahoma State fan that I know of doesn't want Casey Dunn to be a part of Oklahoma State football.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us out there have become just kind of a little bit, not a little bit, I think a lot, some fans have become a lot like, I just don't want them to call our plays anymore. I want to go get somebody who's a little bit further removed from Mike Gundy. It just seems like he's kind of the puppet of Mike Gundy, and it's just there's no creativity. It's blah, blah, blah. It's kind of the way that we're calling offense is the same emotional, it's the same excitement level as the emotions that Mike Gundy shows on the sideline, which is just blah, right? I mean, that's kind of the offense here. So it's a tough deal. I know Oklahoma State fans are ready to move on to somebody else. And I'll say this Oklahoma State job, from an offensive coordinator perspective, if Mike Gundy would get out of the way and instead change philosophies, don't go try to find the best job for the longest amount of time. Go find the best job for however long it is, like you did with Dana Holgerson, like you did with Todd Monken. If those are your parameters, Oklahoma State will be one of the most attractive offensive coordinator jobs in the United States of America, period, hands down, no questions asked. Oklahoma State will be able to get just about anybody that they want. from a realistic perspective. I mean, they're not going to like pluck Alabama's offensive coordinator or anything like that, but from an apples to apples, they will be able to get a great offensive coordinator.
Well, and another thing that I would also say is, we've talked about the culture, the consistency thing has changed in the transfer portal. Yeah. I would argue it's the same thing when we talk about with coaches. That, okay, we've always looked at it, well, if they get good, they leave. Okay, but think about it, guys. Steve Sarkisian left Bama. Yeah. I believe Lane Kiffin left Bama. Okay, if you got a good coordinator, it doesn't matter what school they're at. If they're good, they're leaving. If they get a head coaching job somewhere, they're probably gone. If somebody else wants to offer more money for them, they're gone. I think my advice to the administration is go get somebody good, and don't worry about, okay, if we get them for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4, it doesn't matter. Whatever time they're here, they're good for, because it's the same thing. And we're having to take the exact same approach when it comes to players too. We can't project a kid that, okay, he's a freshman this year. We think by the time he's a senior, he's really good. Guys, by the time he's a senior, he may not be here. Right. There's probably a better chance than not he won't be. So I think that's to me, if one philosophical change is we got to play for the here and now. We got to go win the next game, and that's really all that you can try to go do. You can't plan, okay, what's it going to look like in 2-3 years? It's got to be what's the best thing we can do for next year, and again, a lot of this stuff none of the fans want, but that's the reality of where we're in, I think.
I think a perfect case scenario of that. You know who Oklahoma State's offensive coordinator should be right now? Marcus Arroyo. Dude is killing it at Arizona State. He was the quarterback's coach here at OSU. I know he went and got the head job at UNLV, and he's at Arizona State, which is a good job. But I would have to think at some point, if we would have offered Marcus Arroyo $1 million to come back and just hand the keys over to run Oklahoma State's offense, he would be the offensive coordinator at OSU right now. I think Mike Gundy, I don't know this for a fact, but Marcus Arroyo has no real ties to OSU. He's probably more of a West Coast guy. So he's probably viewed as a guy that would come in, do a great job, and leave. Now we're having to hire another coordinator. So let's stick with a guy like Casey Dunn, who will create consistency for us. That's, I think, right there, the core of what's frustrating Oklahoma State fans, beyond just the play on the field.
Yeah. Well, and Gundy made some comments a while back that, he just didn't like hiring coordinators. And part of me wanted to say, you know what, that's your job. That's why we pay you so much money is to go get these guys, because like I said before, the other realistic thing is now, just because you got a coordinator this year, he's going to have totally different kids next year.
Yeah. Right.
It's not the old ways are done. So to me, go get the most talented person that you can, whether that talented player, talented coach, and let the chips fall where they may. I will say this, and this is another thing I kind of want to talk about is when we talk about coaching shuffles and all that kind of stuff, the portal and everything, with the way that money for getting recruits is about to it's already changed. Mm-hmm. It's going to change even more next year. It's almost getting to a point where it's very difficult to hold a coach. At what point, how do you hold a coach accountable? Because, okay, well, I could have gotten that guy over there, but we didn't have the money. Okay, so now I got to play this guy. Well, he's not as good, whatever. Obviously, you got to draw the line somewhere. I mean, you can't just you can't use that excuse or reason, just forever. But I think that is something that's going to be very difficult moving forward. Is how do you evaluate a coach in a transfer portal area where if I get onto a kid because he needs to be getting onto, and he just says, "Screw this, I'm going somewhere else." It's not like like we talked before. It's not like the old days where you can really coach them up. It's now that the players are in complete control. So I think just as a general thing, and I know we're very honed in on Oklahoma State's situation because that's what we focus on. But if as a general rule, that's got to be very difficult to hold a coach accountable given those set of parameters he's got to work with.
Scott, as well as I do, and I understand your general parameter there. But by and large, if you love a kid and they know that you love them, and even if you're, say, raising your voice at them, or you're telling them something through words that not necessarily something they want to hear, if they know it's coming from a position of love and a position of they know you are just trying to make them better, even kids in today's day and age, they're not soft that way.
Yeah.
But where they won't listen to it is you barely know their first name. Every time you do something, you're on their ass. You're sarcastic. They don't know whether you actually give a crap about them, right? Yeah. And now you're yelling at them. That's where kids nowadays. Whereas in the past, they were just like your mom and dad would say, "Well, too bad. He's your boss. Shut up and do what he's doing." Nowadays, that's where a kid will have an opinion like, "Well, screw you. You don't even give a crap who I am, right? I'm not listening to that crap." Right. Whereas, but still, even today, if you dig in and build relationships with kids and you love on them and they know you love you love them, they will allow you to coach them. Now, the one thing that will always trump that is a certain amount of money, right? I mean, there's a certain amount of money that, hey, coach, I love you. Hey, coach, I love OSU. But damn, man, I got to take care of my family here, right? I mean, so there is a point where it reaches that, but I still do think you can coach kids hard, but you got to do it in that way.
Yeah. No, I would agree. It's the world is all about relationships, whether it's in business, whether it's coaching, officiating. I think the relationship that we have, the way that we start to develop a rapport with coaches, that matters. It's like that in all facets of life. And I don't know what our coaches' relationships are with our players. One thing I think that was good is, last year, I think we were all suspecting Ollie Gordon was going to go somewhere. And I'm going to and this is pure speculation, he probably got an offer for more money to go somewhere else.
Right.
We know there's other people out there that would love to get a Doak Walker winner in their backfield, and they got more money in Oklahoma State, but yet he stayed. So obviously there's some type of a pool that kept him here. But again, it's with the amount of money that's going around these days, I mean, it's just it's the Wild West. Somebody's got to do something to get this thing reined in, because I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
The biggest problem I see with it, is, so you mentioned Ollie Gordon. Oklahoma State has to fork over God knows how much of whatever his NIL deal is to keep him at Oklahoma State. Well, it's like Mike Gundy. For every dollar that he takes from Oklahoma State, that's one more dollar that we don't have to pay an assistant. So for him, he's robbing Peter to pay Paul. So for every dollar he makes, yes, he is putting money in his own coffers, but he's taking money away from the program that's actually feeding his bank account, which he has a contract now where that doesn't matter, right? So for every dollar you give Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, that's one more dollar that you don't have to give his offensive line in front of him. Yep. And so I think that is a real issue, to where you have 7 guys in front of a guy making, all these millions of dollars, and you got 7 guys in front of him that are making all that happen, and they're not making squat, right? Yeah. And so I promise you, if I'm not making squat and he's making all the millions, I ain't listening to no crap from anybody when things go south. I mean, you can throw the crap at people that are making the millions of dollars. I think you're seeing a little bit of that.
Yeah, that was actually something I wondered when we first started with the NIL deal, that, okay, you got an offensive lineman that's making, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 grand a year, whatever it is, and you got a guy back there that's making $1 million, and you're the one that's actually doing the work for him. That immediately has got to create a little bit of locker room tension just in and of itself. Now, obviously, that has to be overcome. Teams are going to have to figure out a way to get along and work together for the good of everybody. But that's one of the things that I think what I've looked at, and I've said before, I think in Oklahoma State's case, let's go get those offensive linemen. Let's go get those defensive linemen, because it's, again, I can take a running back, and again, you get a running back in here that's a credible athlete, get him in Rob Glass's weight room. He's gonna get a little bit better. But we got to let's get him a hole to run through, and man, we could have a lot of success. In my opinion, football's won and lost in the trenches. Always has been, always will be. So
yeah, and I think it's won and lost schematically too. I mean, I think you can, I just think our run scheme stinks. I mean, I think a large part of why we couldn't run at the beginning of last year and the year before that, and then this year, is because Casey Dunn just doesn't dial up a good run scheme. It's just way too plain. It's way too obvious. I think defenses run to their keys. I think you had a period of about 4 or 5 games in this last 3 years to where we were running an entirely different set of run plays and an entirely new different blocking scheme that has saved this whole thing. Because if it weren't for the 4 or 5, like the Kansas State game last year, the Kansas game, and, those games right after that bye week where we went to the gap scheme, if it wasn't for that period of time, Oklahoma State football, it's certainly the running game at Oklahoma State in the last 3 years would have looked a lot worse than it would have looked actually kind of how it actually has been.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we talked about that in previous shows as well, that, there's these problems. This wasn't just a 1 year problem. These problems have been there for a while now. We've kind of been able to cover them up, kind of, I guess, use the term smoke and mirrors. I mean, there are a lot of issues that I think that we're going to have to get addressed. But I think the other thing that also I kind of want to talk about tonight is we know Alan Bowman's going to be moving on. We know hopefully Flores is going to be healthy for next year.
He will be.
Rangel hopefully is back, so we get those two guys back. My guess would be OSU is still going to want to go get another quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be if they would look in the high school ranks. I don't know if they would look in the portal to get another guy. But my guess would be they want to replace Bowman with somebody. Now the question what kind of guy are you going to go get? My hope is we go get somebody that's a little bit mobile, because I just think that as we talked about with Oklahoma State's offensive line, the problems that we see, we only have one running back there, a quarterback that can't run. It's pretty obvious where the ball's going whenever it gets handed off. So my hope would be that we would go get somebody. I guess the first question we'd have to ask, okay, is Flores the guy? Is Rangel the guy? And if they're not, well, we got to go get somebody else that we think could compete immediately, not necessarily somebody that we think we're going to have to, with some development, they could be good. But I guess that's the biggest question is, are one of those two guys the guy, or do we need to go get somebody that can play immediately?
It has to be somebody that's better than Milwaukee Smith, because if you go get a transfer portal guy, or certainly any kind of decently hotshot high school guy, I think, especially if Smith plays these last 2 games and puts some good film down for other schools to see, then you go get another quarterback out of the transfer portal, right? I mean, So it'd have to be somebody who's going to be better than Milwaukee Smith. Yeah,
and like I said, that I could see them going to the high school ranks to go get a hot shot out of high school and try to develop them. I could see them going to the transfer portal. Again, to me, I think the biggest thing is just find the best quarterback you can find, whatever that, with all the measurables, things you see on tape, find the best guy that you can find and try to get him in here. So,
see, I go find a guy that doesn't. So I want to go into next year with my 3 deep at quarterback being Garrett Rangel, Zane Flores, and Milwaukee Smith. So I want to do whatever it takes to make sure that is my top 3 quarterbacks. I don't want to go get a Drew Brown from Hawaii, and then you go get a Drew Brown for a 1 year, and because of that, Milwaukee Smith looks like he's going to be 4th string. Now he transfers to Fresno, right, or something. Or hey, maybe he had way bigger schools than that. I mean, he had a bunch of really nice schools offering him. So my concern there is I don't want to go get somebody. I want my top 3 quarterbacks to be those 3 going into next year. And to your point, how do you hold coaches accountable? You say this all the time, Scott. You say it better than anybody. Okay, I'm not comparing Mike Gundy to Alabama. I'm not comparing his situation to OU or Texas A&M. I'm comparing him to Kansas State. I'm comparing him to Iowa State, Baylor, TCU, Texas Tech, Utah, BYU, I think, is in a different league, Houston, those types of schools. So I think that's how you hold a coach accountable, as you say, well, Mike, I understand that the NIL is not there. I understand things are tough and it's very difficult because funds are limited, but they're comparable to everybody else you're competing against. That's how I hold a coach accountable.
Yeah, and like I said, and I think that every coaching staff is having to evaluate that whatever NIL funds are available. Yeah. Okay, how do we best use that? Because I'm pretty sure we used a lot of our NIL funds last year to keep Ollie Gordon. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch assumption there. Was that the best thing to do? Yeah, I mean, was that the best thing to do? Maybe, maybe not. I can't say for sure that it wasn't. Ollie's a heck of a running back. We know that. But at the same time, okay, would it have helped if we'd have gotten a couple more linebackers?
Spread it out.
Yeah, would it? I mean, I think that's the other thing that we've got to look at is what's the strategy when it comes to NIL. Because as I've said, position players will get the flash. They'll get TV cameras on them, but it's the guys in the trenches that are winning the ball game. I mean, that's the way it is.
That's a great point. Like when Shohei Ohtani signed with the Dodgers on my main site, Dodgers Daily, one of the best things that he did was he deferred all that money. I mean, I think he goes like against the salary cap. There's not a salary cap. There's a luxury tax in baseball. He only counts $46 million, which for a Shohei Ohtani type talent, only counting $46 million to your luxury tax threshold is like stealing the guy, right? And so that's a great point you make about Ollie Gordon, especially at Oklahoma State. If you have limited funds, it's going to be very difficult to have a superstar because, yeah, we do actually have the money to pay for a superstar like an Ollie Gordon, but do we have the money to pay for the superstar and an offensive line and a tight end and 3 or 4 receivers and an entire defense? That's going to be the question or like you said, are we better off going and getting like, a good running back, not Ollie Gordon, but a good running back, like even a Jaden Nixon, right? Putting him back there with a substantially better team around him. Which way is better for Oklahoma State?
In my opinion, I think we go after a good running back and we try to build the team around him.
That's a great point.
That's in my opinion, that's what I think. But at the same time, I also got the business mind going as well. And I think back, okay, in the spring, Ollie Gordon had just won the Doak Walker Award. We had a pretty good, last year I would call a pretty good season. You make it to Arlington, you beat OU, we're riding high, things are looking good. Well, look what happened for the season. We sold out for the first time ever because of all and let's be honest, Ollie Gordon was a big part of that. The reason why we sold out. Everybody wanted to go see Ollie. So, I mean, some of that I can't say, okay, well, it was a bad deal because,
it's tough.
Good things. I know it's hard to see that now with the record we've got.
Yeah.
But the season, man, business was looking good, but I do think if your goal is to win, build a program, do those kind of things, I think that you're going to have to be good in all facets. Teams do not win teams can win games with holes. And whether it's, they don't have as good a skill guys or they got 1 or 2 positions that aren't quite as good, but you're not going to win a championship unless you're solid in all phases of the game. So to me, if you want to build a championship team, you got to be solid in all phases of the game. And that includes how you spread your NIL funds around. So
yeah, absolutely. We have some comments being left here. Hey, Scott, if you're listening right here, I'm going to type this into. Break your comment into multiple comments. YouTube has, I think, like a 200-character limit on their chat. So if you would, just leave multiple comments, and then we'll get to that. So, hey, Wes, good evening. Thank you so much for joining. Wes is not a fan of Casey Dunn. So those are the kind of conversations. Let's say Casey Porter and Scott McKinley were the coaches. These are all the conversations that these coaches are having to have behind closed doors in the meeting rooms of what is the strategy moving ahead? Do we want to go get some stars, the skilled players, and spend all of our money on that and just try to figure out how to get a bunch of linemen? Or do we just want to get a bunch of good players at every single position? Because I can tell you this, Mike Gundy's philosophy in the past has been to go cheap on every position, right? Meaning like go get a 3-star or a lower, don't necessarily go get, but then have the big time skill players, have a big time running back, have big time receivers, big time quarterback. That literally has been his formula. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Oklahoma State can afford what Mike Gundy's actually done in the past, which is have a big time quarterback, big time receivers, big time running back, and then cheap everywhere else. I think probably Oklahoma State does have the money to do that.
I think they do. The other X factor I would also say in this is yes, the player development model, it doesn't work from the standpoint of, okay, we bring a kid as a freshman, then by the time he's a senior, it's going to be good. But the other thing I think they've also got to evaluate is, okay, if I bring a kid in the transfer portal in December, and we get him all the way through the spring and the summer, working with Rob Glass, working with our coaching staff. Okay, could he project? Do we project him higher than the value that we had to pay to get him?
Good point, Scott.
So that's kind of, I think that's the other thing that they've got to look at. And like we mentioned before, all this it's Moneyball. It's basically it's what's the guy's market value. He actually is better than what his market value is.
Yep.
Which that takes a whole lot of evaluation. That's going to take a whole lot of time. But then
baseball coaches have been doing it for years.
Yeah, yeah. but then the other most difficult thing is, okay, so let's say we project him higher than his market value is, but we're coming in at the same price as somebody else. Somebody else saw the same thing. Well, now your recruiting skills and everything else that you've always had to do in order to convince kids to come to your school, that's still in play. It's not completely out the window. I mean, obviously, if you armed me with $100 million, I can build a great team. But you're still going to have good recruiting skills, even if you think you've got a kid at a lower price, but somebody else may be matching that price. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Well. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The other thing I was going to say is, I don't know what the state of the locker room is right now. I can't imagine that it's fantastic. But at the same time, with as many players that are going to be outgoing and incoming next year, I think that's another potential silver lining that we're going to have this team is going to look totally different next year, I think, than what we're seeing currently. So, and with a year like this year, that's not a bad thing.
I would think the locker room is similar to kind of the positioning that you and I are getting into. You know, like 3 weeks ago, we were mad as hell, man. I mean, we were, every podcast was fire and brimstone, I mean, it was just, we had smoke coming out of our ears, right? And now it's more like, okay, well, how do we fix it? I mean, I'm done being mad. I kind of think that's probably where the locker room's at too. And with the outgoing guys, it's like, guys, let's just finish up, whatever. They're probably not even mad about it. I mean, how could you be at this point, right? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's the saying. That's a very true saying. If you're a coach, you're either outgoing, so it doesn't affect you, or if you're one of the coaches that are staying, you're squarely in the how do I fix this mode, just like we're having the conversation here. And here is the biggest problem Oklahoma State's always had. So let's say Oklahoma State goes and finds a diamond in the rough. Right, the Moneyball thing. They go find a guy that is going to be better than what you have to pay for him, right? So what other schools are going to do, instead of doing their own research, they're just going to follow behind Oklahoma State, and then as soon as Oklahoma State offers one of these diamonds in the rough, they're just going to go right behind there, and they're going to offer $1 more. The old Price is Right theory. That's what's happened to Oklahoma State in the recruiting ranks over the years, is that teams like Oklahoma and Nebraska and the bigger name brands, they pluck all of our 3-star guys, and only because we offered them, because they trust our talent evaluation system. That's a problem.
Yeah, the one of the other things that I thought about with because I agree with you. I mean, that's always been the way that it's been. I tell you, another thought that I'd had is, if you take a kid that he was a very highly ranked kid coming out of high school, goes to one of those big schools, and he just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Either they don't develop him well, he's not getting as many reps, all that kind of stuff, and he's out of Alabama. Well, okay, but we still think he's a really good player. We can do that the other direction now too. I haven't seen a whole lot in the portal. It's mostly all right. We're getting guys like when it Leon Johnson that came from a D2 or D3 or something like that. And he was a good ball player. He was a very, very good find. But I'm curious as to why we're not. I mean, obviously, if a kid goes to a larger school and he really is that superstar, he's going to be playing. We're not going to get him. But I've got to believe that there's some other guys that they went to a larger school and they just got lost, and we might be able to find them a home here at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
But so up till now, that really hasn't happened. That really hadn't been the strategy as of yet.
That D. Anderson was the last one I can remember. He's a 5-star recruit. This is going to be. You remember D. Anderson came from LSU. We threw him the 60-yard pass on the last play against OU, and we needed like 11 yards to get the first down. I know the play was open, but I mean, you're through at 60 yards and you needed 11. I'm still frustrated about that if you can't tell. But anyways, D. Anderson is the perfect case study of exactly what you're talking about, Scott. We said this on the last show. Going to say it again in case people didn't see the last show. I totally agree with Mike Gundy that it's a waste of time to go get Ronald Jones, to go recruit Ronald Jones, because Ronald Jones, even if he commits, you have no idea whether he's coming to Oklahoma State until you see that fax come through. Because all the way up until that happens, he's got every school in America still trying to recruit him. And they're offering nowadays, I mean, back then it was just they were offering him a bigger brand of school to play at, right? Nowadays they're offering him more money. Okay, so if Oklahoma State goes and recruits D. Anderson or Ronald Jones or Herschel Sims or XLK or any of the 5 stars, they are not going to get those guys, okay? They're not going to. Even if they get him committed, somebody else is going to swoop in and offer them $100,000 more in Oklahoma State, and these kids are going to take that. I totally get that. So Mike Gundy in the past has always seen that as a waste of time and then he's also seen it as a real problem because if they decommit the night before, now what recruit do we go get to replace him? Because everybody's already taken, right? And that's happened to OSU in the past and left us kind of with our pants down, if you will. So nowadays, that has to change because just what you just got through saying, Scott, when that guy goes to LSU now and is not happy and then wants to transfer, if you haven't recruited him previously, he is not coming back to Oklahoma State, right? If you've recruited that 5-star and he committed to you, but then he got $100,000 extra to go somewhere else, now he's not happy there, he will come back to Oklahoma State. So the one way that OSU can actually get 5-star players in their program that will be happy here is if they recruit him the first time, let him go off, and then they transfer back. So Mike Gundy, for that very reason, has to start recruiting all the best players in the United States of America and start developing relationships with them out of high school. It is no longer a waste of time.
You know, it's the same thing that I would tell somebody if I was giving them advice in the business world. You know, you can never know and have a relationship with too many people. You know,
right.
You know what I mean? You never know who, where the opportunity is going to come and who may be bringing it. So to me, I think that's what I would have. I would have the entire coaching staff out there. Guys, let's see as many guys as we can. Let's talk to as many guys as possible. Even if we don't get that guy, continue a relationship. Because again, with the portal, just because he's gone for 1 year doesn't mean you can't get him the next. This is a year by year recruitment, and we've got to treat it as such.
Yeah, you've got to have a prior relationship with these guys. And I'll tell you another aspect of this. You see this all the time, Scott. And hey, the JUCO thing I don't think is going to work as well. It never has been great because you never know how they're going to incorporate. But you mentioned get them in, the spring, and then you have to play them by the next fall. So schemes are getting ready to get smaller, not bigger, because you're getting ready to play. You know, before you wouldn't play. You would, like Bob Simmons redshirted an entire class. So an entire class wouldn't even play till they were third year on campus. They've been in the same system for 3 years before they ever even have to play a varsity game, right?
Right.
Well, you're talking about 6 months now. So you're going to have to either dumb down your scheme to where guys can learn it like the back of their hand in 6 months, or you're going to have to start recruiting guys that are like Ivy League type smart, that can just get to your school, pick up on it, learn it like the back of their hand. You can't go get a guy that's going to take 2 years, like the philosophy that it takes 15 games to get comfortable in college. Mike Gundy has to get off that crap. Even if it's the case, you can't have that be your philosophy because you don't have that time anymore.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when it comes to who's going to play, you got to play the best player now. We can't try to project where the guy might be in 2 years or, with a little bit more development. You got to play the best player that you can right now, because the only thing really you can focus on truly is the next game. You know, and I know that, you know, every coach always, that's the oldest coach speak in the world. That, well, we're only focused on the next game. Yeah, I get that. But I know coaches in the back of their mind are thinking, all right, yeah, I could throw this guy in here this year. And, you know, I think he needs another year of development, that kind of deal. If he's the best guy right now, you got to play him. Just that's all there is to it. If he's the best guy, you got to play him. There's no more waiting anymore.
Absolutely. You cannot be afraid of kids. Now, if Oklahoma State starts losing, like the situation to where I have a problem is like the DJ McKinneys. Like he jumped for Oklahoma State. Now I know Colorado's good this year, but he jumped from OSU to Colorado. That shouldn't happen, right? No. Those are the situations to me that make you think, the hell's going on here? If you start if Oklahoma State starts having kids jump like to Iowa State, right? Like that's your coordinator deal, right? I mean, if we lose a coordinator, like we lost Jim Knowles to Ohio State, who was upset about that? Like nobody. I mean, it's like, okay, we lost to Ohio State, right? I mean, we lost 2 guys to head coaching jobs. Nobody was upset with that, right? Okay, yeah. So, but if you start losing coordinators to like Kansas State, like your coordinator jumps to Kansas State, that kind of tells your fans you got an internal problem somewhere, right? So the DJ McKinneys of the world, if we start seeing transfers of guys that are going to and making lateral moves, I think that'll be a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, and hopefully we won't see any more of that. I mean, and again, every player is different, every coach is different. And you don't know. Some coaches are going to vibe with the others, and they're not. It's no different than any other organization that's out there. But I would agree with you on that. The lateral moves is what we don't want to go against. I really think, and like I said, my dad is as old school OSU as it gets. We've got to get out of this mentality of, it's such a bad deal if they get good and they leave. We've got to get out of that. We've got to realize, look, if at least they were good for a year,
Les Miles helped Oklahoma State, even though he left Oklahoma State with our pants down after the Alamo Bowl in 2004. The job he did for OSU, the way he said it, he was a plus positive in large capacity for Oklahoma State.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. I think there's still a lot of people today that they look back on the Les Miles era, and like you said, he did a lot of good things for OSU. Yeah. Beat OU twice. We went to bowl games. I mean, it was not the best circumstance how he left, but know what, guys? I guarantee you, every university in the country has got a story like that where a coach left and they didn't leave in the best manner, but at least they advanced the program. So I mean, I think that's all we can look for is, again, Mike, next year, who's the best players we can get, who's the best coaches we can get. If they're on staff, great. If they're not, well, let's go get somebody else. But basically, you got to focus on how do we have the best team we can put on the field for next year. And that's it.
Absolutely. Les Miles, move the ball forward. Larry Fedora, move the ball forward. Dana Holgerson, move the ball forward. Bill Young, move the ball forward. Todd Monken, move the ball forward. Yep. All these guys, yes, we had to replace them, but they moved the ball. That background you're seeing, well, you're not seeing it on this podcast. You're seeing the softball one. But when you see a Boone Pickens Stadium that is full, all of those guys I just mentioned are a big part of that. I mean, I don't think it would be full without those guys, right?
Yeah. Well, and you think about it. We look back. 2011 was the best team in school history. Okay, how many of those guys are still on staff? One.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Gundy.
Yeah, Gundy.
It was done there.
And I think I can't remember. I can't even remember.
I can't either.
But that's the point. It doesn't, and I think that's the whole deal. I would say when it comes to the way this game works. It doesn't matter. You put a trophy on the wall. I don't care who the coach was or what. The trophy stays there. The banner still stays there. So that's the whole deal. It's. I mean, let's be honest. We're all chasing trophies. That's the way every college football program in America is at. We want to have something we can hang a banner on the wall, say we won something in this particular year. So. We can't. Again, I really think that we've been looking too far outside the horizon. We've got to start looking at the immediate, because that's all that we've got now with the transfer portal is we've got to focus on the immediate. So
I'll say this: the margins are slimmer than ever. The teams are going to be more identical than ever, even from the Blue Bloods to the Oklahoma States, right?
Yeah.
And so, if for more than ever, it's always been this way in every level of football, but quarterback play is going to determine whether you're good or not. Period. End of discussion. Alan Bowman was good enough to – Alan Bowman was exactly what Oklahoma State's schedule was last year. There were some clunkers. There were some great games. There was some mediocre. And at the end of it, when he threw it all together, it was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Alan Bowman has been exactly what Oklahoma State's season has been this year. Jake Retzlaff at BYU. You saw BYU get better and better. I know they lost their last 5 games, But you saw them in Boone Pickens Stadium. They were building momentum even though they weren't winning games. They darn near beat OU last year in Provo the week before, right? So they weren't necessarily winning games, but you could see them building. And that's because they actually had a quarterback battle until about halfway through last year. Then they settled on Jake Retzloff. He built into that system. And then boom, look at Iowa State. Rocco Becht. He is really, really good. Look at K-State, okay? Avery Anderson is fantastic. He's hurt right now. He's not able to – if you watched last night's game, he was a shell of himself running the ball. And guess how K-State looked last night? Yeah. They looked terrible, right? Look at Arizona State. Arizona State finished last season running the Wildcat, like not as a package. Like they were running the Wildcat as like their offense because they did not have a quarterback that could run that offense at the end of last year. Insert Sam Leavitt, look at them now. I mean, they went from being predicted to be the last team in conference to being a team that is really, really good. So the first thing that Oklahoma State has to do, in my opinion, is they have to figure out the quarterback position. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I don't necessarily agree with the strategy of doing this, but, you know, Gundy running the 3 quarterback system last year, I don't think Gundy was doing that just because he wanted to be difficult. I don't think, you know what I mean? I think he was doing that because there was nobody that just had taken the job. You know, I mean, that's a tough situation because you want the quarterback to, everybody on the team can see that's the best guy, that's going to be the starter, and let's rally around that guy. But I mean, and you think about it, the other thing you look at back on this year is Bowman has been very inconsistent this year. He just has been.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and then we have Rangel get hurt. Flores has got a foot injury. I mean, it's like, okay, how much more bad luck juju can we have at the quarterback position this year? So no, I agree with you. I think the number one thing that we've got to get shored up next year is quarterback play. My hope is the guy is already on campus. That's my hope. But I do think.
I like Rangel.
Yeah. Well, I like what I saw out of Rangel. Everybody talks about Flores when he's healthy, that he's going to be a good quarterback. Malaki Smith, from the time he's been in there, he's made some mistakes, but I mean, I don't expect the kid to come in and play perfect. But he's got some good things to bring to the table. So my hope is that guy's already on campus. But
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if he's not, you better go get one. I mean, that's all there is to it. So we got to have good quarterback play.
Absolutely. You know, Major League Baseball is big this way. We talk about all the players you need to go get. Like most of the time, like for a Major League club, it's about, can I keep the players I already have? Like the Pittsburgh Pirates will go get like a Paul Skeens, but, you know, that's kind of, do they have the money to build around a Paul Skeens for one? But the big deal with them is they can get a Paul Skeens, but can they keep him, right? Yeah. So once we get, like, if Garrett Rangel ends up being really good, can we keep him, right? That's gonna be the situation there. But, hey, this has been a great conversation, Scott. You have any final thoughts?
No. One thing I would say for this next week is to the fans, that we've got a lot of seniors that have really elevated this program, played really well. Brennan Presley among them. Let's go support those kids next week, no matter what happens with the outcome of the game. Those kids deserve some support, and let's be there and let's wear orange and let's go Pokes.
Absolutely. Don't let whatever's happened to this point, don't let the comments, don't let any of that trump going and honoring Brendan Presley and all the rest of those seniors. And also, it's just a bad look for Oklahoma State not to have a Boone Pickens that is full, and I don't think it's going to be because it's the first weekend of Thanksgiving break, and I think probably a lot of the students aren't going to be there, but it is what it is. But I hope as many people as possible come out to Boone Pickens Stadium Saturday, and Oklahoma State gets them a big win. So, hey, Scott, this has been a lot of fun. Always enjoy talking to you. So, hey, thank you so much for joining.